Stay back, and lower that weapon, she snapped, voice throaty with panic and threat. Kyan didn't realize she meant his arm until he followed her blazing silver gaze to the prosthetic from his right shoulder down. In the faint, flickering lights of the half-ruined docking bay, he saw her crouched behind a metal crate, the plates of her alien armor reflecting gleams of sickly neon. He raised both hands, one flesh, one matte black alloy, showing her he was no threat. But she only stiffened, the ridges of her brow bunched, those almost translucent fins at the sides of her head quivering like tense sails in a storm. He forced a smile. "It's not a weapon," he said quietly. "It's my arm." Her dark, full lips parted, revealing a glint of pointed teeth. She huffed, uncertain, her flared nostrils taking him in like she was sampling the air. Kyan lowered his voice even more, leaning toward her, one knee shifting on the cracked deck. "Listen. I'm just trying to get my ship running. I didn't come here to fight." She hissed softly, a sound that reminded him of steam escaping a pressurized hatch, then gestured with the slender, luminescent lines running down her forearms. Kyan saw them glow in shifting patterns that he had no context to interpret. Her race, whatever it was, seemed so at home in this gloom, even if the rest of the spaceport looked deserted. Standing carefully, he lifted his prosthetic to show her the obvious joint, the old battle scarring. "See? I can't detach it." She relaxed her stance, fractionally. Only then did he notice that her body was far more delicate than the fierce edges of her armor suggested, and the fins behind her ears were attached to a smooth, scaled crest that swooped along her jawline. Above those pointed ears, a swirl of faintly glowing turquoise markings hinted at swirling patterns that might continue down her neck. She didn't break her gaze from his arm, though. Her eyes flicked warily from his fingertips to the elbow joint, as though expecting it to fire at any second. He cleared his throat. I didn't catch your name." She slid her hand across the top of the crate, knuckles brushing a layer of dust. "Vayli," she said quietly, then snapped back into a guarded posture, her voice deeper than the typical human female's. "And your name? Why are you creeping around in a place that belongs to my people?" Kyan let out a slow exhale, trying to ignore the dryness in his mouth from hours of searching this broken station for parts to repair his battered ship. "I'm Kyant. My ship was shot down orbiting Riosa. I had to make an emergency landing at the nearest outpost." He let the words come out steady, focusing on her unwavering stare. He had trouble meeting her gaze, not from fear, but because the patterns shifting beneath her skin were strangely mesmerizing, like glimmers of starlight dancing in water. "I heard this docking bay might have spare thrusters or hyperdrive couplings. I was going to scavenge just enough to get back into orbit." Her lips formed a flat line. She seemed to consider him, the strange angles of her face revealing an otherworldly beauty that made his pulse rise. "You traveled far, human," she said finally. "And I sense you mean no harm." She brushed the dust from her hands, then tipped her chin, letting those ear fins sway gently. "But I still don't trust you." "Not yet." Kyan nodded, stepping away from the crates to show he offered no aggression. "That's fair. We just met, and I'm intruding on your territory." The station's fluorescent bulbs sputtered overhead, casting momentary flashes that brought out the reflective shimmer of her scaled temples. Her armor looked battered too, scored with slashes that might have come from energy blades. Another hush settled between them as they stood, uncertain. Then she spoke again. "Why is your arm like that?" she asked, flicking her gaze toward the prosthetic. "Your body is so fleshy. Yet that appendage is not." He rotated the arm, the mechanical hum faint. "Lost the original in a starship accident a few years back," he said, though the memory of that fiery crash threatened to tighten his chest. "This is a replacement. It's usually more helpful than frightening, but I see you're still suspicious." Her jaw tensed. "I've never met a human with something that looked so lethal. Your metals are strange. They reflect no light." She stepped closer. Kyan forced himself not to move, though her unblinking stare made him aware of every breath. He could smell something floral and crisp on her skin, a fragrance that reminded him of morning dew. "My people fuse with living shells," she continued, speaking half to herself. We can't remove them either, but they grow with us, forming a bond. Yours is mechanical, but it sits on your flesh the same way. Maybe we're not so different, he said, half grinning, hoping to ease the tension. Vayli didn't laugh, but her eyes softened. She stepped back, smoothing her palms over the metal crate. Fine, she said at last, as though coming to some internal resolution. I will help you find what you need, if it will send you on your way faster. Kyan's eyebrows rose in relief, but before he could muster a thank you, she added, And if you dare try anything else, I'll personally separate you from that arm for good. He swallowed, giving a slow nod. Understood. She moved around him with calculated grace, leading him deeper into the ruined corridors of the outpost. As she passed, Kyan felt the whisper of her bioluminescent fins brushing the air. Up close, the swirling patterns across her collarbones and upper arms pulsated softly in time with her breathing, like a living tapestry of light. Despite her threatening words, he sensed an undercurrent of curiosity in her posture. He followed her, careful to keep a respectful distance. In the corridor, panels flickered, revealing hallways littered with debris. Bent metal, shattered glass, and collapsed beams told the story of some ancient conflict or disaster. Vayli kept her chin high as they wove through broken doors. My people once thrived on Ryosa, she said, after a moment's silence. This station was our outpost, a place of trade and gathering. But an outside force ravaged it, forced us underground. Now we only come here to salvage bits of our lost technology. She cast him a sidelong glance. That's why I was here. Until I sensed your presence, and thought you might be one of them. Kyan felt a knot in his stomach. I'm sorry your people suffered, he said quietly. I'm no agent of whoever harmed you. I'm just trying to get off this rock. She acknowledged his words with a small tilt of her head, but said nothing more. The corridor opened into a chamber lined with consoles and half-smashed crates. The few functioning lights revealed jagged holes in the ceiling, letting thin rays of starlight spill in. Kyan's gaze traveled to Vayli as she knelt beside a pile of twisted cables. Her slender fingers deftly sifted through them, occasionally glowing as if in reaction to her heightened focus. He approached carefully, kneeling beside her. The closeness allowed him to truly register the subtle patterns on her skin. The scales around her temples shimmered with shifting turquoise and pale lilac. Occasionally, the light in the corridor reflected off them, giving her an iridescent aura. She smelled again of those fresh, floral undertones, and it made his head swim. He tried to focus on the debris. How often do you come here alone? He asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. She shrugged. As often as I must. She pulled out a small, crystalline device from the tangle, holding it up to a flickering console screen. The device glowed faintly, responding to her presence. These might be the modules you need for your thrusters, she said, handing it to him. Her eyes held a guarded curiosity, as though she was waiting to see if he would snatch it greedily. Gently, he took the crystal in his flesh hand, letting its subtle warmth seep into his palm. Thank you, he murmured. As they worked side by side, the tension between them slowly ebbed, replaced by a tentative cooperation. She would pass him a salvaged part. He would examine it, comment on its condition. Every once in a while, their fingers brushed, and she would stiffen slightly, her gills or fins fluttering. One time, he moved his metal arm to steady a console that threatened to topple, and she let out a startled hiss, her eyes flaring wide at the perceived threat. Realizing it was only him preventing a crash, she flushed. He could see the color darken the scales at her jawline. He realized he was holding his breath. The posture of her body hinted at a tension that went beyond mere suspicion. He couldn't help but notice how striking her form was. The athletic curves of her limbs, the slight glow from her skin's markings, the way her voice rumbled low in her throat when she spoke. That attraction startled him. He tried to dismiss it, reminding himself that he was stranded on her planet, that he needed her cooperation, not her scorn. But he couldn't stop the subtle leap in his pulse when she looked his way. They gathered a small stash of potential ship components, and she led him to a secondary corridor. This one sloped downward, deeper into the structure. Power flickered again, and sparks rained from a broken conduit overhead. She stopped abruptly, pressing a hand to Kyan's chest to halt him. He felt the warmth of her palm through his jacket. "Shh," she whispered. "We're not alone." He strained his ears, hearing a distant metallic clank. The corridor was bathed in shadow, and every nerve in his body lit with cautious adrenaline. Bailey stepped silently forward, fins quivering at the sides of her head as if they were specialized sensory organs. Kyan's throat clenched as he followed, mindful of his footsteps. He could smell the faint ozone tang of exposed wiring and the stale musk of long-abandoned corridors. Without warning, a shape lunged out of the darkness, all shrieking metal limbs and flickering red optics. A battered security drone, or what remained of one, rattled forward. Its mechanical arms swung in lethal arcs. Bailey jumped back with a snarl, her luminous patterns flaring bright. The drone whirled, targeting her, energy blade extended. Kyan moved on instinct. He swung his prosthetic arm, the reinforced plating catching the drone's blade. Sparks flew, and the clang reverberated. The drone's second arm slashed downward, cutting into Kyan's jacket and grazing flesh. He hissed in pain but gritted his teeth, grappling with the whirring machine. Bailey darted around them in a graceful arc. In an instant, she produced a short blade from her side, its surface shimmering with alien inscriptions, and plunged it into the drone's sensor cluster. The metal beast gave a final, sputtering jolt and collapsed. Kyan's heart pounded. He looked down at his arm, where faint scorch marks marred the plating. Then he felt a warm trickle of blood where the drone's blade had cut. Bailey's breath was ragged, her eyes wide with alarm. She reached out hesitantly, her glowing fingertips hovering above his wounded side. "You're hurt," she muttered, voice abruptly less hostile. "Come, let's move. I know a place in these corridors, a place where we can seal ourselves in for safety, then I'll look at your wound." He nodded, pressing his flesh hand to the cut. The pain wasn't unbearable, but he felt lightheaded. They hurried away from the battered drone, going deeper through the station's winding halls until Bailey found a sealed door. She pressed a sequence on a half-broken panel, and the door groaned open, revealing a small maintenance chamber. Inside, everything was dusty, but at least the door seemed capable of locking. She ushered him in, then slammed the door shut behind them. Only a single emergency light glowed overhead. The space was cramped, full of crates and old tools. Kyan leaned against a crate, breathing heavily. Bailey crouched by his side, her gaze darting over his injury. "Let me see," she said, the commanding tone returning. He peeled back the torn cloth of his jacket, revealing a bleeding gash. She grimaced, then rummaged around in a nearby chest, pulling out a battered kit. From it, she produced a slender tube etched with swirling glyphs. She glanced up at him, her jaw set. "This will sting," she warned. Kyan just gritted his teeth. "Go for it." Her eyes flicked to his metal arm before focusing on his wound. She pressed the tube gently over the cut, and Kyan felt an intense burn as a clear, shimmering fluid seeped into his skin. He hissed, clenching his hand into a fist on the dusty floor. But almost immediately, the pain dulled, replaced by a cool numbness. Bailey let out a soft breath. "It'll close soon. It's our antiseptic. Not perfect for humans, but it should help." She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her brow. For a moment, they were both silent, each catching their breath. Then, to Kyan's surprise, her expression turned almost shy. She looked away, her scales along her jaw darkening slightly. "Thank you for saving me back there," she said. "Your mechanical arm, you used it to protect me." He let out a shaky laugh. "Well, you helped too. I think you actually did more damage to that thing." She shook her head. "But still, I was wrong about your arm. It's not a weapon, at least, not when you aim at me." A faint smirk danced across her lips, then vanished under her worried expression. "There might be more drones patrolling this place, or worse. Our rest here can't be long." Kyan studied her face in the dim light. There was a vulnerability in her posture now, the fierce warrior softened by the near-death encounter. He tried to ignore the butterflies in his stomach, that surge of gratitude and fascination. "I owe you," he said quietly, resting his head against the cold metal wall. He felt a wave of exhaustion creep over him. "I can't fix my ship alone. And you've been more help than I deserve." She stiffened, as though uncomfortable with gratitude, then gave him a small nod. "Let me finish healing your side," she said, carefully applying a band of the alien dressing. Her fingertips brushed his abdomen, sending a jolt through him. He swallowed hard, willing himself not to react, but he saw how her eyes flicked up to meet his. A soft flush colored the crest behind her ears. She quickly pulled her hand back and cleared her throat. They ended up leaning side by side against the crate, letting the antiseptic do its work. The soft hum of flickering lights and distant echoes of dripping water filled the silence. Kyan found his eyes drawn to the intricate patterns along her collarbones that continued in faint glows across her arms. Something about the gentle rise and fall of her breathing made his chest tighten. She felt so alien, yet so tangible at the same time. He almost forgot his predicament. "What did you learn to fight?" he asked eventually, voice hushed in the cramped space. She gave a low chuckle, running a hand along the blade at her side. "Growing up in exile. My people taught me early. Everyone learns to defend themselves once they're old enough to hold a blade." Her gaze turned distant. "We had no choice. Our lives were always under threat." Kyan nodded, searching her face. "Is that how you ended up alone in this station? Are you looking for something to help them?" She hesitated, clearly torn about how much to reveal to a stranger. Eventually, she sighed. "My people are scattered. We hide in different enclaves. Some believe it's too dangerous to return to these old ruins, but the technology we left behind is precious." She waved her hand at the old consoles. "I come when I can, gather anything that still works. We hope to rebuild one day, to reclaim what was ours." In that weary softness of her eyes, Kyan saw more than just a skilled warrior. He saw someone weighed down by hopes, fears, and burdens. He opened his mouth to respond, but a rumble shook the floor beneath them, followed by a loud metallic screech. Vayli sprang to her feet, gripping his forearm to haul him upright. "We can't stay here," she said urgently. "If the drones didn't catch us, something else might have." He staggered, still off balance from the blood loss, but her strength surprised him. Her hand was firm, and again, he noticed the warmth of those shimmering markings under her scales. "All right," he said, voice tight. "Where to?" She drew in a breath, chest rising, and her posture shifted to that of a leader. "I know a secure part of the station deeper in. But it's a risk. The power systems might be compromised." He looked into her eyes and saw a mix of steel-hard determination and fear. It amazed him how easily he wanted to trust her. "Lead the way," he murmured, forcing a smile. Her earphones fluttered at the motion of his lips, as though she was reacting to his expressions. She offered a half-smile back, just a flicker of it, then turned on her heel, blade in hand, ready to face the derelict corridors once more. They stepped out, and the door sealed behind them with a heavy clang. No turning back, Kyan thought. Not that he had any other choice. He wondered briefly how a chance encounter with an alien warrior, who once seemed ready to kill him, had turned into this uneasy partnership. Each time he shifted his metal arm, he caught her glancing warily at it, as though she still couldn't decide if she found it terrifying or intriguing. And every time he noticed that flicker of color in her cheeks, an unexpected warmth spread through his chest, like the faint stirrings of something he hadn't felt in a long time. They made their way cautiously down the corridor, hearts pounding as they braced for whatever else lurked in the darkness. They found the deeper section of the station behind layers of twisted, half-collapsed corridors. Drones scuttled in the distance, but Vayli's keen senses helped them avoid most. A few times they had to dash under sparking conduits or squeeze through narrow passages lined with warped steel. Kyan's wound flared painfully whenever he twisted his torso, but Vayli checked on him every so often, pressing the bandage gently to see if it held. She was no gentle nurse, but her concern made him feel something akin to comfort. At last, they pushed open a door that led into a wide chamber ringed with large columns. The pillars soared to a high ceiling, part of which had collapsed, letting a slice of moonlight spill in. Dust motes drifted in the faint beam. Vayli paused at the threshold, scanning the area with narrowed eyes. Satisfied that no immediate threats lurked, she stepped forward. Kian followed, boots scraping over rubble. At the center of the chamber stood what looked like an ancient console or dais. Broken, half-burned cables snaked around it. Vayli approached cautiously, resting a hand on the console's surface. It lit up with a flickering glow, and she inhaled sharply, an expression of longing ghosting across her features. "This was once a ceremonial chamber," she whispered, tracing a pattern in the dust. "My people used it to bond with the living shells that shaped our bodies, to attune ourselves to the energies of Riosa's core." She pulled back, swallowing hard. Kian felt an ache in his chest. "I'm sorry. It must be hard, seeing it like this." She cast him a sidelong glance, not quite meeting his eyes, and just nodded. They prowled around the dais, stepping over fallen beams. Kian spotted a small cluster of crates partially hidden by rubble. He signaled Vayli, who nodded and helped him push the debris aside. Carefully, they pried open a crate. Inside were glimmering rods of some crystalline alloy, apparently intact. Kian let out a low whistle. "These might work for my thruster couplings," he said, picking one up. "They're in better shape than I hoped." Vayli examined another rod, turning it in her slender hands. "Take what you need. We should return to your ship as soon as we can, if we're to get you airborne." But her tone was hesitant. Kian wondered if she doubted his sincerity about leaving. She owed him nothing, and yet she was helping him. Maybe that choice kept conflicting with her own goals. He turned to her, setting the rod aside. "Vayli," he began, not sure how to phrase what he wanted to say. "I appreciate what you're doing. You don't have to help me, especially since humans—" He stopped abruptly, realizing he was about to lump all humans together, as if they were collectively at fault for what had happened here. He didn't know if humans were behind her people's troubles. But given her initial hostility, it was possible. "I guess I just want you to know I'm grateful." She studied him for a moment, her expression inscrutable. The swirling luminescence in her fins was gentler now, a soft pulse rather than a bright flare. She lowered her gaze, and for once, she looked almost flustered. "You were kind to me," she said. "Kindness is rare among outsiders." Her throat bobbed. "And you had plenty of chances to betray me, but you didn't." He met her eyes, seeing the reflection of the fractured moonlight there. A spark of understanding passed between them. She leaned in slightly, as if about to say something more, but a sudden roar echoed through the chamber. They whipped around. Something large and metallic crashed through a collapsed section of the wall, sending debris flying. Kian's stomach lurched. Another security drone? No, this was bigger. A hulking machine, shaped vaguely like a biped, stomped into view. Shards of broken stone clattered around it. Its torso bristled with weaponry, red sensors scanning the area. Vayli breathed a curse under her breath, raising her blade. Kian's heart hammered. He clutched the crystalline rods, then set them aside carefully. He doubted any salvage was worth dying for. The mechanical behemoth locked onto them. With a shrill hum, an energy cannon on its arm began charging. "Run!" Vayli yelled, grabbing Kian's hand. They sprinted behind a fallen column, the heat of a plasma blast singing the air behind them. Fragments of stone rained down. Kian grimaced, pain lancing his side, but he kept moving. They ducked behind the dais, adrenaline spiking. The massive drone's steps shook the ground as it advanced. Vayli's eyes darted around, searching for a vantage point. Kian steadied his prosthetic arm, inhaling a shaky breath. "I'll distract it," he murmured. "You get around back." She shot him a stunned look. "You'll get yourself killed, human. That thing can melt you." He nodded grimly. "I'm counting on my arms plating to take the brunt of it. Maybe if I occupy it, you can get close enough to hit its vulnerable spot." He assumed it had won. Most mechs that large had sensor clusters or power cores that could be breached if you got in close. She bit her lip, torn. Then her fins folded back. "Be careful," she hissed, pressing her palm to his cheek in a sudden gesture of connection. The warmth of her skin startled him, and in that brief moment, he felt her fear for him, but also a potent sense of trust. Then she slid away, dashing around a row of pillars. Kyant centered himself, stepping out from behind the dais. The mech's sensors locked on instantly, and it unleashed a volley of plasma shots. He dove to the side, letting them impact the dais, which exploded in a shower of sparks. Pressing his back to a partially collapsed column, he raised his metal arm, bracing for the next barrage. Another jolt of searing heat tore into the marble floor near his feet. He forced himself to move, sprinting to the next piece of cover, firing a small sidearm from his belt, though it barely scratched the mech's armor. He had to keep it focused on him. "Hey, you chunk of junk!" he yelled, hearing his voice echo in the chamber. It whirred in response, striding forward, cannons charging again. He saw the red glow intensify. Any second now. A blur of motion caught his eye. Vayli leaped from an upper ledge, having scaled a partially collapsed pillar with agile grace. Her blade glinted in the moonlight as she somersaulted through the air. The mech sensed her too late. She landed hard on its back, plunging the blade into a gap in the plating. Electricity danced along the hilt. The mech jerked violently, letting out a burst of static and mechanical screeches. It spun, flailing to dislodge her. Kyant seized the chance to charge in from the front. He lifted his prosthetic arm, slamming the reinforced metal into the mech's chest plating. The impact jarred him to the bone, but he felt the plating dent. He roared in pain and determination, ignoring the new throbbing in his side. The mech's cannon fired, a wild shot scorching the floor, but Vayli twisted her blade deeper. Sparks erupted, and the machine convulsed, toppling forward. With a deafening crash, it collapsed. Kyant stumbled back, breathing in ragged gasps. Vayli jumped free before it hit the ground, landing in a crouch, her fins flaring, eyes blazing. For a moment, either of them moved. The mech spat a final shower of sparks, then went still. Kyant's legs nearly gave out from the adrenaline crash. Vayli darted to his side, catching his arm. "You fool!" she hissed, voice trembling with relief. "You didn't even try to dodge half those shots." He grimaced, letting her help him steady himself. "Are you kidding? I was running all over the place." She let out a shaky breath, and to his astonishment, she pressed her forehead gently to the curve of his neck. Her skin was hot, the luminescent pattern shimmering with intense color. He stood there, too stunned to speak, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. Slowly, he raised his good arm to rest his hand on her scaled shoulder. She exhaled against him, her breath hitching as though fighting back some surge of emotion. "You did it," he murmured, his voice coming out uneven. She looked up, eyes shining. "We did it," she corrected, her tone a fierce whisper. Then, seeming almost embarrassed, she pulled away, clearing her throat. They limped to the far side of the chamber, retrieving the salvage rods they'd found. Kyant tucked them into a sturdy bag, ignoring the burn in his ribs. Vayli hovered protectively near him, and each time she glanced at his prosthetic, that faint blush crept back into her cheeks. Clearly, it no longer frightened her as much, now it gave her a reason to linger close, as though watching the slight motions of that metal limb stirred some uncertain desire in her. They moved on, finding an exit route that led into a narrow side corridor. Vayli explained that it should eventually surface near the docking bay. The journey was a blur of pain and exhaustion, but the adrenaline of battle gave them enough momentum to press forward. Kyant felt relief knowing they had the crucial parts for his ship's thrusters. If they made it out, he might get off Ryosa. Yet a strange pit formed in his stomach whenever that thought crossed his mind. Finally, they exited into the battered docking level, near the partially shielded bay where Kyant's ship lay. Vayli gasped softly, seeing the wreck of his small craft. Smoke still curled from the bent engine casing, and scorch marks covered the hull. She turned to Kyant, eyebrows rising in concern. "You really flew that thing?" she asked. He chuckled, though it hurt. I'm not exactly flying it right now. But hopefully these rods will fix that. She helped him haul the salvage inside. The cockpit was cramped for even one person, but she followed him in, curiosity bright in her gaze. She traced a finger along the control panels, examining the readouts. Kyan's heart thudded, feeling unreasonably protective of this battered ship, as if it were the only thing he had left. They spent the next hour removing scorched components and installing the new rods. Vayli worked with surprising mechanical aptitude, though she claimed no great expertise. They toiled in near silence, except for the occasional grunt or hiss of pain from Kyan whenever he twisted awkwardly. Their shoulders brushed in the confined space, and every time they did, Vayli's scales seemed to flush deeper, her gaze flicking away. When they finally got the rods in place, Kyan slumped in the pilot's seat to test the power sequence. Lights flickered across the dashboard. The engine coughed and sputtered but showed signs of life. He exhaled in relief, turning to Vayli with a grateful smile. I think she might actually fly. Vayli nodded slowly, arms crossed, her expression guarded. Good. That's what you wanted. She lingered at the threshold, staring at the beaten metal of the floor. Kyan recognized the shift in her. She was bracing herself for him to leave. He rose carefully from the seat, approaching her with soft steps. I owe you my life. Is there anything I can do for you, for your people? Her lips pressed together in a thin line, and her fins drooped slightly. What's done is done. We are scattered. We survive. You. She hesitated, voice trembling. You can go back to your star lanes. That's enough. An ache squeezed Kyan's chest. He glanced at his ship's console, thinking of how close he'd come to death, and how she'd saved him more than once. Reaching out, he gently placed his metal hand on her upper arm. Vayli, come with me. The words slipped out before he could overthink them. She jerked back, eyes wide, the luminescent lines flaring bright. What are you saying? He searched her gaze, feeling his pulse hammer in his throat. This place is a war zone. You risk your life scavenging. Whoever destroyed this station might come back. If you come with me, maybe we could find a safer place for you, for your people to gather. I'm not sure. But I don't want to leave you here alone. She stared at him, her expression torn between shock and a dawning warmth. Then she shook her head slowly, crossing her arms protectively. My people, we need me here. I can't just vanish. He swallowed, stepping closer so their bodies almost touched. His voice came out in a hushed murmur. Then let me stay a while. We can figure something out, some plan to help you and your people. I know I can't solve all your problems, but... She cut him off with a sharp look. Are you hearing yourself, human? You barely escaped this place with your life. You nearly died. Why would you stay? He paused, searching for an answer that wasn't just raw emotion. Because I don't want to run anymore, he said, surprising himself. Because maybe there's more to this galaxy than just scavenging to survive, or drifting from port to port. And because I'd like to see you again. The admission made his cheeks burn. He could see the swirl of color flushing her face as well. She looked away, arms tightening around her torso, the patterns on her skin flickering like a storm. I don't know, she whispered. Your arrival here changes things. We rarely trust outsiders. He reached out his living hand, tipping her chin gently so she'd meet his eyes. Her scales felt smooth and cool, the faint glow responding to his touch. Trust me, he said, voice trembling with sincerity. She closed her eyes, as though overwhelmed by the closeness, then exhaled a slow breath. Your arm, it still frightens me, she admitted quietly, her lashes trembling. I look at it and remember how your kind once built weapons to shatter my people's defenses. But then I see how you use it to protect me, and I don't know what to feel. Kyan's chest tightened. He eased closer, slipping his metal hand over her slender wrist. Let me show you, he murmured. Carefully, he guided her hand to touch the plating. She pressed her palm flat against it, the ridges of the metal warming from her body heat. He felt her breath hitch. Slowly, Her fingers traced the seam where the prosthetic joined his flesh. Each stroke was feather-light, yet it sent sparks of sensation through him. Her eyes lifted to his face, searching, uncertain. He bent his head, brushing his forehead against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other in, on the edge of something new and terrifying. Outside, the storm of conflict still raged on Ryosa, but within the cramped hull of the battered ship, time seemed to stand still. Finally, Veli drew back, her face awash with conflicting emotions. "If you stay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it won't be easy. I have obligations to my enclave. They don't trust outsiders. You might have to fight for your place." Kyan nodded, heart pounding in a mixture of fear and excitement. "I'll fight. I've got nothing else to lose." His sincerity seemed to shake her. She inhaled sharply, then nodded with trembling resolve. "All right," she whispered. "Then let's prepare. Because once my people discover you, we may have bigger battles ahead than those drones." He squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of determination. The flickering cockpit lights reflected on her scales, making her glow like a rare gem. He had no idea how this would end, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of purpose, something that transcended mere survival. And the look in her eyes told him she felt it too, that neither of them could walk away unchanged. They moved quickly, storing the spare rods, rationing out whatever supplies Kyan had left on the ship. Veli kept glancing around the cockpit, fascinated by the human technology, but she never lingered, as though she feared becoming too comfortable. Kyan wondered what her people's enclaves looked like. Did they incorporate advanced tech seamlessly with their living shells? Did they worship ancient cosmic energies? She warned him about the possibility of contact with other Ryosans soon. "They'll come searching for me if I don't return," she said. "But we can use that to our advantage. I can lead you to them on my terms." Kyan nodded, wincing at the pain in his side as he tried to straighten. She frowned, eyeing the bandage. "You're still hurt. You need rest." He mustered a grin. "I'll manage. But maybe we should find somewhere safer than this open bay." Veli's gaze flicked to the half-collapsed ceiling. "There's an underground route from here. A tunnel that leads to an older part of the station, near an access hatch. Once there, we can slip through the caverns my people use." She paused. "If we reach them without being intercepted, we might avoid bloodshed, initially." He braced himself. "Let's do it, then." They gathered what they could carry, stepping back into the station's broken corridors. Every clank of Kyan's boots echoed ominously. Veli stayed ahead, her posture tense, her blade drawn, guiding him through labyrinthine passages. Occasionally, Kyan's prosthetic arm would scrape against a bulkhead, and she'd glance back, color blooming in her cheeks as though remembering their closeness in the ship. Their glances became a silent language, a quiet reassurance that they faced these shadows together now. A few times, they heard metallic scuttling or distant hissing. They either hid or crept around side passages. Twice, they saw the silhouettes of other Ryosan shapes flickering down corridors. At one point, Veli pressed Kyan against the wall, her body flush against his, to avoid detection. His heart thundered, the sensation of her scaled arm braced against his chest. She whispered in his ear, "Don't move," and he swore every nerve in his body was on fire, not just from fear, but from the sudden, intimate contact. Her breath on his neck, the subtle pulse of her glowing markings. He wanted to turn his face and meet her lips, no matter the danger. But he held still, aware of the armed patrol passing just around the bend. When they finally slid free, Veli's cheeks were crimson beneath the faint turquoise shimmer. She cleared her throat, leading him onward without a word. Yet the tension between them crackled like static, building with every close brush of their bodies, every shared look in the gloom. Eventually, they found a half-sealed hatch leading downward. The mechanism was jammed with debris, but Veli and Kyan managed to force it open with a few well-placed strikes of Kyan's mechanical fist. The hatch led into a narrow shaft with a ladder descending into darkness. Veli went first, her luminescent fins providing a soft glow that helped him see. He followed carefully, wincing as the rungs bit into his injured side. At the bottom, the air was cooler, with a hint of dampness. They stepped into a wide cave-like tunnel that curved gently. The walls were made of rough stone, occasionally lined with metal supports. Veins of luminescent crystal ran through the rock, creating an otherworldly glow. Vayli paused, inhaling. "These tunnels connect to the catacombs," she explained, voice echoing softly. "My people have used them for generations to hide from threats on the surface. But it's not entirely safe." Kyan nodded, scanning the passage. "You lead, I'll follow." Her lips curved in a faint smirk. "You've been doing that all night." He found himself smiling despite the tension. They moved on, stepping quietly, letting the faint glow of the crystals light their way. For a time, they walked in silence, side by side. Kyan could feel Vayli's warmth, hear her steady breathing. The quiet darkness pressed in on them. Every so often, water dripped from stalactites overhead, pattering on the stone floor. The hush felt intimate, drawing them closer. When they paused to rest on a broad ledge of rock, Kyan slumped against the wall, exhaustion pulling at him. Vayli sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees, her fins drooping with fatigue. He opened his ration pack, offered her a small protein bar. She stared at it, then accepted gingerly, sniffing at the packaging. "It's safe to eat," he assured her. She tore it open with razor-sharp teeth, grimacing slightly at the processed taste, but hunger won out. Kyan watched her, studying the slope of her cheeks, the subtle parted lines of her scaled crest. She flicked her gaze his way mid-bite, her expression faintly amused. "You stare a lot," she said, raising an eyebrow ridge. He turned red. "Sorry. You're just different from anyone I've met." She nodded slowly, finishing her bite. "You too?" She swallowed, hesitating. "In my enclave, everyone shares a connection through the living shells. We can feel each other's presence, sense emotions. We have deeper empathy, but also less privacy. With you..." She paused, searching for the words. "It's strange not feeling your presence in that way, but sometimes I think I sense it anyway, like a ghost impression." He licked his lips, absorbing that. "I'm not sure I understand how your bond works, but maybe I'm picking up something from you too. Sometimes I feel like I can read your mood without you saying a word." She nodded, her glowing markings shimmering gently, as if reflecting that idea. A comfortable silence stretched, and Kyan felt the tension of the day catch up with him. Before he realized it, his eyelids drooped, and he dozed off. When he stirred, he felt Vayli's fingers lightly brushing his hair out of his face. She was watching him with a mix of curiosity and compassion. Heat flooded his cheeks. "Sorry," he mumbled, sitting up straighter. She withdrew her hand. "You're wounded and tired," she said matter-of-factly, though her voice was softer. "We should move, but I didn't want to wake you too soon." She stood, offering him her hand. He took it, letting her help him up, the contact sending a tingle through him. Pressing on, they navigated deeper into the tunnels. Gradually, Kyan noticed the carved symbols in the walls, ornate designs that glowed with the same turquoise hue as Vayli's fins. He realized these catacombs were a living record of her people's heritage. It felt like hallowed ground. He wondered if that was why Vayli walked slower here, her shoulders tense, as though each step was a reverent act. Suddenly, her fins flared, and she turned sharply, pressing a finger to her lips. Kyan froze, scanning the darkness. Ahead, in the distance, he heard hushed voices, alien voices. He tensed, instinctively raising his prosthetic arm, but Vayli shook her head, whispering, "Wait." She inched closer, peering around a bend. Kyan cautiously joined her. Just beyond, the tunnel widened into a cavern lit by clusters of glowing crystal. Several figures moved about, each with fins or scales similar to Vayli's, though no two looked exactly alike. They wore partial armor, some carried weapons. From the look of it, they'd established a small encampment with supplies, crates, and rudimentary barricades. Vayli's hand slipped into Kyan's, and he felt her tremble. "That's my enclave," she breathed. His heart pounded. "You said they might not react well to an outsider." She nodded, the color in her cheeks fading. Yes, but it's time they met you. Her grip tightened. Stay calm. Let me do the talking. They stepped forward. Almost immediately, the closest guard noticed Vayli's silhouette and barked an alert. Weapons aimed in their direction. Vayli raised her hands, calling out in her native tongue. The guard recognized her, lowering his spear slightly in shock. Vayli! What are you doing with that thing? He motioned to Kyant. Others gathered, tension thick in the air. Vayli raised her chin, her fins bristling. He's called Kyant, she said. He's a human who crashed here. I helped him, and he wants to help us. A ripple of discomfort passed through the group. One, a tall female with elaborate crest fins and golden lines swirling across her arms, approached with a scowl. We need no help from outsiders, she snapped, her gaze flicking to Kyant's metal arm. Look at him, half machine. You expect us to trust that? Kyant tried to keep his expression neutral, though he felt a surge of defensiveness. Vayli stood firm. I vouch for him. He fought the station drones at my side, and he saved my life. He is no threat. Another alien stepped forward, glaring suspiciously. Your judgment is clouded, Vayli. The humans were the ones who let the corporations come, who bombed our outposts, who… Vayli bared her sharpened teeth. Not all humans. Kyant is different. The tension rose, and Kyant realized a fight could erupt at any moment. He held his ground, hands open, showing he held no weapon. Finally, a more elderly Ryosan with silver fins raised a staff, signaling for silence. Vayli, he said, tone measured. Why do you bring this human here? She drew a breath, meeting the elder's gaze. Because I believe he can help us find a safe path off this dying station. He has a ship, but he's not leaving yet. He's offered to aid us in gathering what we need to rebuild. The elder's eyes narrowed. And what if he betrays you, as outsiders do? Kyant stepped forward, swallowing hard. I won't. I swear. I know I'm just one person, but I give you my word I won't harm you. I want to fight whatever threat remains here, not you. The elder studied him for a long, tense moment. Then, with a curt nod, he stepped aside. The tension didn't vanish, but weapons were lowered, and the group parted to let Vayli and Kyant pass. Vayli led Kyant deeper into the enclave, her grip on his hand loosening. He felt the stares of the Ryosans all around him, some fearful, some angry, a few merely curious. He tried to keep his posture non-threatening, wishing he had a better way to convey respect. He followed Vayli's example, dipping his head slightly at each watchful alien. At last, they reached a small chamber carved out of the rock, lit by a gently pulsing crystal that hung from the ceiling like a lantern. Vayli motioned for him to enter, then sealed the stone door behind them. She sagged against the wall, eyes shut. That could have gone worse, she murmured. Kyant exhaled. But still not ideal. They hate me. She shook her head. They hate what your kind did, or what they believe your kind did. It'll take time to earn their trust. She approached him, resting a hand gently on his chest. Thank you for not panicking back there. He gave a faint grin. I was too terrified to do anything dumb. Vayli's lips twitched in a slight smile. Terrified or not, you stood your ground. She lowered her gaze, tracing a fingertip over the torn cloth near his bandage. Does it still hurt? Her closeness made his heart pound. The shifting luminescence of her markings cast gentle patterns across his chest. Less than before, he managed, though he winced. She clicked her tongue, gently probing the bandage. Then, with careful hands, she peeled it back to examine the wound. You need better care, she said. We have healers. They might be reluctant, but I'll convince them. He swallowed. Thank you. Her face was inches from his, and he could feel her breath against his throat. She paused, as if caught in the charged moment. Her dark lashes lowered, and she murmured, You're not as fragile as I first thought, Kyant. Before he could respond, she leaned in, pressing her lips against his in a tentative, almost shy kiss. The moment stretched, the reality of it sinking into him. Her scales were warm against his skin, her mouth tasting faintly of the protein bar's artificial sweetness, and something else uniquely hers. He let out a quiet groan, leaning in, one hand coming to rest on her hip. She trembled, parted her lips slightly, and deepened the kiss, as though a dam had broken inside her. All the tension, fear, and unspoken longing poured into that moment. It was a clash of worlds, his breath hitching at the electric thrill of her proximity, her luminescent fins flaring in time with her pulse. His prosthetic arms slid around her waist, and she let out a soft sigh into his mouth, unafraid of the metal now. She pressed closer, fingers curling into the fabric of his jacket, as if afraid he might disappear. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, hearts pounding. She gazed at him, eyes half-lidded with wonder, the glow of her markings flickering erratically as if her emotions were running wild. Kyan's cheeks burned, and he could only manage a shaky smile. Her lips curved too, though it was a shy, uncertain expression. She stepped back, exhaling shakily. I should find the healers, she said, her voice soft, almost breathless. Stay here. I'll come back for you. He nodded, throat too tight to speak. She slipped out the door, leaving him alone with the aftershock of the kiss, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He sank onto a low bench carved from the stone, his mind whirling. Was this really happening? Hours ago, she'd held him at blade point, convinced his arm was a weapon. Now she was risking her people's wrath for him, and he was risking everything just to be near her. The dizzying rush of it all made the darkness seem alive. Time passed in a slow crawl. He heard distant echoes from the enclave, a mix of voices, footsteps, the trickle of subterranean water. Each minute that Veli was gone, he feared she might not return. Maybe her people forbade her from seeing him again, maybe she realized what a risk this was. But then the stone door slid open, and she reappeared. She carried a small satchel and was accompanied by a taller Ryosan with elaborate turquoise fins. The newcomer eyed Kyan suspiciously, but when Veli spoke in hushed tones, the tall one nodded and gestured for Kyan to remove the bandage. Under the alien's deft care, Kyan felt a soothing warmth spread through his wound, and within minutes, the cut sealed better than before. He let out a relieved sigh, noticing Veli watching anxiously from the side. When the healer left, Veli lingered by the doorway, arms folded, her gaze flicking around as if uncertain what to say. Kyan stood, testing his side, marveling at the near-complete relief of pain. That's incredible, he murmured. Thank you? Veli nodded. I can't promise you have their trust yet, but it's a step. She cleared her throat. Tomorrow, the council will want to question you. They may have demands, conditions. Your presence here will not be easy. He approached her, placing a hand lightly on her upper arm, feeling the smooth texture of her scales. I'm ready, he said. I won't run. Her eyes searched his, a flicker of relief passing over her features. I just hope we can convince them that you're an ally. That night, Veli led him to a small side chamber to rest. She wasn't permitted to stay with him, it seemed, as part of the enclave's rules. But before she left, she pressed her lips to his again, more confidently this time, her hands framing his face. He kissed her back with a mixture of tenderness and hunger, a swirl of warmth blossoming in his chest. When she pulled away, her cheeks were flushed, her fins quivering with emotion. Rest, she whispered, stepping into the corridor. We'll face the council together at dawn. Then the door slid shut, leaving him alone with the lingering sensation of her kiss. Morning, or what passed for morning underground, arrived too soon. A pair of guards escorted Kyan through winding tunnels to a large chamber illuminated by shimmering crystals overhead. The Enclave's council stood in a half-circle around an ornate stone table. Veli was there, looking composed but tense. She acknowledged him with a small nod as he stepped forward. The elder who had addressed Veli before spoke first. Human, your presence here has stirred old wounds. We lost much to your kind. But Veli claims you mean to aid us, to share your technology, or your starship in service of rebuilding. A murmur rippled through the others. Kyan swallowed, nerves twisting his stomach. I can't speak for all humans, he began. But I never belonged to the forces that wronged you. My life has mostly been one of scraping by on the fringes. Meeting Veli changed my path. If there is a way to help, I'll do it. My ship might not carry you all off-world, but maybe we can open trade, bring supplies, whatever it takes to rebuild. An armored warrior with pale green fins slammed his fist on the table. We can't trust him just on his word. We need proof. We need a show of loyalty. Another council member nodded. The catacombs are infested with drones that could threaten our sanctuary. If you truly wish to help, rid us of them. We've tried, but they're too well armed. If you succeed, perhaps we'll hear more of your proposals. Kyan looked uncertainly at Veli. Her eyes flashed with determination, though he sensed her worry. I'll accompany him, she declared. We'll wipe out the remaining drones. The elder frowned. You risk yourself again? If he fails, you could die. Veli lifted her chin proudly. I trust him. That settled it. The council grudgingly agreed. The plan: descend into the deeper sections where the drones had established a nest. If Kyan could help clear them, it would demonstrate his genuine intent. As they left, Veli whispered, You don't have to do this, you know. There's no shame in leaving. But Kyan shook his head, steel in his gaze. I want to do it. For you, and maybe for them, too. They armed themselves from the enclave's modest armory. Veli insisted on giving Kyan a short spear with a power coil embedded in the tip, alien technology that delivered a shock on contact. He tested its weight, feeling the hum of energy. His prosthetic arm might not be a gun, but it could handle the recoil. They set out with a small squad of Ryosen warriors, descending lower into the labyrinth. Tension was thick. Not all of them trusted Kyan. Some shot him dark glances. Veli stuck close by, ignoring their side eyes. She explained in hushed tones how the drones had once been part of the station's security system but were reprogrammed by invaders to hunt Ryosans. As they approached the nest, the tunnels grew colder, the air stale. They found evidence of drone presence: deep gouges in the stone, burned holes from plasma bursts. A sense of foreboding weighed on them. Then, at a bend, they spotted mechanical silhouettes lurking behind natural rock formations. The Ryosans formed a defensive line. Kyan took a breath, stepping forward to test the spear. A drone jerked upright at the sound, sensor lights flaring. Another drone scuttled into view, spindly limbs unfolding. Then, like a swarm, half a dozen advanced, chattering with mechanical menace. A vicious battle erupted. Plasma bolts lit the cavern in flashes of blue. Ryosan blades crackled with energy. Veli danced among the machines, her movements deadly and graceful, slashing at vulnerable points. Kyan rammed his spear into a drone's torso, feeling the shock discharge. He gritted his teeth as shrapnel flew. Another drone lunged, swiping with spiked limbs. A warrior beside Kyan was knocked to the ground, pinned by a drone's claw. Kyan drove his shoulder into the machine, forcing it off, then hammered it with his prosthetic arm. Veli executed a finishing thrust. The warrior scrambled back up, giving Kyan a brief, surprised nod of gratitude. The fight spilled into a wider cavern where even more drones lay in wait. Laser fire peppered the walls. One shot grazed Kyan's arm, scorching the edge of his metal plating. He hissed, but the prosthetic saved him from a crippling injury. Veli was a whirlwind of lethal strikes, but exhaustion began to wear on them. Amid the chaos, Kyan noticed a large, heavily armored drone commanding the others. If they cut it down, the rest might lose coordination. There! He shouted, pointing. Veli understood immediately. She rallied the warriors, forming a wedge formation to drive into the drone's position. Kyan rushed in with them. As they collided with the drone leader, it unleashed a torrent of plasma blasts that sent two Ryosans flying. Kyan yanked Veli behind a rock outcropping as a searing bolt whizzed past her head. Careful! He growled, heart racing. She muttered thanks, eyes blazing. They circled around, flanking the armored drone. Kyan waited for it to turn its sensors toward the warriors on the other side, then leaped out, driving his spear into its side. Sparks flew as the charge discharged, but the plating held. It swiveled, smashing him with a metal limb. He went sprawling, pain shooting through his shoulder. Vayli let out a furious cry, hurling her blade. The spinning weapon lodged in the drone's sensor cluster, cracking it. The machine sputtered, thrashing. One of the Ryosen warriors closed in with an energy staff, striking repeatedly. The leader drone crumpled, a shuddering collapse that triggered a chain reaction in the swarm. Drones froze, jerked aimlessly, or retreated. Then, the nest fell silent. Smoke coiled from ruined husks of metal. The Ryosen staggered, bloodied but victorious. Kyan panted heavily, retrieving his spear. Vayli rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. Their eyes locked. "Are you all right?" she breathed, pressing a hand to his chest. He coughed, nodding. "I'm alive." "You!" she grimaced, wiping a smear of mechanical fluid from her cheek. "I'll live, thanks to you." A hush fell as the rest of the squad took in the wreckage. They had done it. Those who had doubted Kyan stared at him with something like respect. One warrior clapped him on the back, offering an uncertain grin. Another simply nodded in acknowledgement. "We should confirm no drones remain," a warrior said. Vayli agreed, carefully leading a sweep of the area. But it seemed the biggest threat was neutralized. After verifying the last corners of the nest, they returned triumphant to the enclave. When they arrived, battered but alive, the council members gathered. Whispers spread. The Ryosen warriors recounted how Kyan had fought valiantly, saving at least one comrade from certain death. The elder leaned on his staff, eyeing Kyan with a more measured expression now. "You have proven some measure of loyalty," he said. "We will speak further on how you might assist us." Kyan met Vayli's gaze across the chamber, heart swelling with relief. She gave him a soft smile, clearly proud. He inclined his head. "Thank you," he said quietly. The next hours were a flurry of celebration and relief. Wounds were tended, drones were dismantled for salvage. Vayli rarely left Kyan's side, as though fearful he might vanish. By the time night fell, or what passed for night in the subterranean world, the enclave was quieter, the adrenaline replaced by exhaustion. Vayli led Kyan back to the same stone-walled room. This time, no one stopped her from entering with him. She closed the door behind them, leaning her forehead against the rough surface, shoulders shaking. Kyan moved close, gently laying a hand on her back. "Hey," he murmured. "You're shaking." She turned, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was so afraid," she whispered, voice trembling. "Afraid we'd lose the fight, that my people would kill you, that you'd leave before I could." She cut herself off, exhaling unsteadily. Kyan curled an arm around her waist, drawing her against him. She let out a quiet sob, burying her face against his shoulder. "I'm here," he murmured, stroking the edge of her fin gently. "I'm not leaving." They stayed like that for a moment, letting the wave of emotion pass. Then she pulled back, eyes flicking over his face. Slowly, she brought her hands to either side of his cheeks. She rose on her toes, capturing his mouth in a tender, lingering kiss. Kyan closed his eyes, sinking into the softness of her lips, the warmth of her scales. Her hands slid down to his jacket, tugging at the fastenings. He swallowed, heart thrumming. Gently, he slipped his arms free, letting the garment drop. She looked at his prosthetic with a curious light in her eyes, then traced the seam again, her breath shuddering. "Is it all right?" she asked, voice quivering, as if seeking permission. Kyan's chest fluttered. "Yes," he whispered, guiding her hand over the metal surface. She pressed her fingertips along each ridge, exploring it intimately. Instead of revulsion, her face held a kind of wonder. Her breathing grew heavier. She leaned in, lips grazing his jaw, then his neck. He shivered, arms coming up around her. When his prosthetic brushed the small of her back, she let out a soft moan, pressing closer. Every nerve in his body ignited at the sensation of her scaled curves molding against him. Their kiss deepened, turning urgent. Their hands roamed, tasting each other's closeness. Time blurred in that enclosed space, a slow spiral of building heat. In the subdued glow of the crystals, they explored one another's forms without judgment or fear. Kayant learned the delicate ridges along her shoulders and the smooth planes of her hips. Veli reveled in the dual sensations of his flesh hand and the cool metal of his prosthetic. Their breathing hitched in unison, kisses growing hotter. She guided him onto the low sleeping pallet, straddling him, her luminescent fins flaring and pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. Kayant let out a ragged breath, enthralled by how she glowed in the darkness, her markings shifting with each beat. She leaned down, pressing her mouth to his. Their tongues brushed, sending sparks of longing through them. Outside, the faint hum of the enclave continued, but in here, they were in their own sanctuary. All the fear, the battles, the distrust, it melted away as they let their bodies speak what words could not. Soft gasps and murmurs filled the space, punctuated by the occasional scrape of scales against skin, or the gentle clink of his prosthetic. When they finally collapsed, breathless, the heat between them lingering, Veli laid her head on his chest, her ear fins fluttering to the sound of his heartbeat. Kayant stroked her hair, still awed by the alien texture of her crest. She said nothing for a while, simply breathing in the moment. He watched her luminous patterns gradually slow, matching the calmer pace of her pulse. Eventually she lifted her head, gazing at him with a mixture of vulnerability and contentment. "I never imagined this," she whispered. "You're so different. And I don't just mean your body." He brushed a thumb over her cheek, smiling softly. "I never imagined this either. Sometimes it feels impossible. But I don't want it to end." She curled against him again. "It doesn't have to," she murmured. "But it will be difficult. My people will want to see results from your promise. The remains of the drones may only buy you time." He nodded, wrapping an arm around her. "I'll do whatever it takes." They drifted into a satisfied sleep, entwined in the hush of the subterranean night. In the days that followed, Kayant worked side by side with Veli and the Ryosan warriors, reclaiming sections of the outpost. He used his knowledge of salvage to help strip defunct consoles for parts that could benefit the enclave. He discovered that the crystals they used had powerful applications in energy generation. The council began to see him less as a threat and more as a curious ally. Veli was seldom far from him. The subtle ways she'd reach for his metal hand, or brush her fins against his shoulder, sent a thrill through him. He learned that her species expressed intimacy not just through touch but through the glow of their markings. When she was near him, her pattern shone brighter, a silent reflection of her feelings. Some nights, they stayed together in that small chamber. Other nights, she had obligations, and he slept alone, though the memory of her warmth lingered. The questions from the council grew more pointed. Could he arrange for trade with other humans? Could he fix their communication systems? He did what he could, rigging up a half-functional transmitter in hopes of reaching a neutral station in the sector. One afternoon, while helping Veli repair a collapsed corridor, Kayant heard a commotion echo from above. A runner dashed toward them, panting. "There's an incursion at the surface." A group of slavers, heavily armed, approaching the bay. Veli and Kayant exchanged a grim look. The runner added, "They must have picked up signals from our salvage. They're looking to capture any living Ryosans they find." Cold dread trickled through Kayant. He remembered hearing rumors of slaver syndicates that roamed the fringe planets, capturing and selling people. Veli's face hardened. "We can't let them find the enclave," she said, jaw set. Kayant felt his stomach twist. "We should try to get them off-world or scare them away, but how?" They reported to the council, who were gravely concerned. The slavers had a small cruiser on the surface. If they established a foothold, the Ryosans risked enslavement, or worse. Kayant's expression darkened. "If we let them roam free, they'll eventually discover the catacombs." The elder regarded Kayant solemnly. "Can your ship fight them?" Kayant grimaced. "My ship's not really equipped for major combat, but maybe I can provide a distraction, draw them off. If I can get them to chase me, you could strike from the flank." Veli placed a hand on his arm. "That's reckless." He turned to her. "Sometimes reckless is the only option. If it keeps them away from your people." He shrugged. The council approved a plan. The Rio Sans who could fight would position themselves at key choke points in the station. Kayant would power up his ship, create a diversion, and hopefully split the slavers' attention. The risk weighed heavily on everyone. When the time came, Kayant and Veli made their way to the docking bay, accompanied by a small band of warriors. The slavers had already begun rummaging through wreckage, scanning for life forms. Kayant nodded to Veli. "Stay hidden. Wait for my signal." She grabbed his hand. "Don't do anything foolish," she said, her voice tense. He squeezed back, gaze resolute. "I promise." He climbed into his ship, sealed the hatch, and booted up the engines. The hum felt reassuring beneath him. Outside, slavers converged, bristling with weapons. As the engines roared, Kayant guided the craft upright, pointing its nose toward them. They scrambled, some ducking behind cover, others readying to fire. Kayant's heart hammered. He had only a small forward cannon. He unleashed a warning shot, scorching the ground. The slavers scattered, yelling curses. Then Kayant kicked the engines to full burn, blasting out of the hangar, drawing them away. As he soared into the open sky above Riosa, he saw on his sensors that the slavers' cruiser was in the atmosphere. It began pursuing him, launching a smaller fighter to intercept. Kayant grit his teeth, weaving around jagged rock pillars that dotted the planet's surface. The fighter gave chase, bright lances of plasma forcing him into evasive maneuvers. He needed to buy time for Veli and the others to strike at the slavers still on the ground. With practiced skill, Kayant pulled tight turns, dipping low near canyons and outcroppings. The fighter pilot was good, matching him move for move. A near miss from their cannons rattled the hull, setting alarms blaring. Struggling to keep calm, Kayant swung the ship in a wide arc, luring the fighter away from the docking bay. If Veli's plan was working, the Rio Sans might ambush the remaining slavers. But he wouldn't know unless he survived this dogfight. A sharp beep warned him of a missile lock. He jerked the ship into a dive, hugging the rocky terrain. The missile shot overhead, exploding harmlessly in the distance. But the next volley found its mark, slamming into the tail. Kayant cursed, the cockpit filling with smoke. The controls sputtered. He felt the ship losing stability. Desperate, he angled for a forced landing near a plateau. The fighter swooped overhead, probably assuming he was done for. The ship slammed into the rock with bone-jarring impact. Kayant's head snapped forward. Lights flickered. Pain shot through his body, but he was alive. Staggering from the cockpit, coughing on acrid smoke, he saw the fighter circling. He might have only moments before the slavers landed to claim him. He realized bleakly that if he died now, Veli's risk and trust would be for nothing. With a surge of determination, he grabbed an emergency bag and scrambled away from the wreckage, taking cover behind a rocky spire. The fighter landed nearby, its engines whirring down. A ramp dropped, revealing two heavily armored slavers. They advanced cautiously, weapons raised. Kayant gritted his teeth, checking the small blaster in his belt. Not enough to take them both easily. But maybe he could get the drop on them. He waited until they were close, then sprang out, firing rapidly. One slaver took a shot to the shoulder, cursing and dropping to a knee. The other returned fire, forcing Kayant back behind cover. A tense standoff ensued. Kayant's heart hammered. He was outgunned, pinned. Suddenly, a flurry of motion emerged from the side, Veli and two Ryosan warriors, having tracked him. The slavers whipped around too late. The Ryosans slammed into them with swift ferocity. Veli's blade flashed, and the fight was over quickly. Kayant slumped in relief. She turned to him, eyes wild. "We saw your ship go down. I had to come." Her voice shook with worry. The other Ryosans secured the slavers, tying them up. Kayant coughed, staggering. Veli rushed to support him. "Come on, we need to move before more arrive." But a new rumble shook the plateau. The slaver cruiser was hovering overhead, spotting them. A loudspeaker crackled to life, demanding they surrender. Kayant's eyes flicked to Veli. "We have no chance against that thing," he said. She grimaced, scanning the horizon. Then, unexpectedly, a volley of energy beams lanced up from the distance, striking the cruiser's underbelly. Kyan recognized the frequency. It was a jerry-rigged cannon from the outpost, courtesy of the Ryosan's salvage. The cruiser reeled, caught off guard. More blasts peppered it, forcing it to retreat. His heart soared. The Ryosans had turned the outpost's old defenses back online. The cruiser jerked away, ascending, apparently deciding the fight wasn't worth it. A cheer rose from the small group. Vayli's eyes met Kyan's, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. She flung her arms around him, ignoring the dust and smoke swirling in the air. He held her tight, the reality of their victory sinking in. The slavers' ground team had been routed, their cruiser driven off by reclaimed station weaponry. It was messy, but they'd succeeded. Later, back in the enclave, the council greeted them with genuine respect. The elder stepped forward, staff tapping the stone floor. Kyan, he began, voice resonant. Today we have seen you risk your life to defend us. You have our gratitude, and our acceptance. The assembled Ryosans murmured agreement. Vayli's fins fluttered with joy, and Kyan felt a wave of relief. He wasn't just tolerated now. He was one of them? The elder inclined his head. We wish to work with you on forging a path forward. There is much to rebuild, and we know little of the galaxy beyond. Will you guide us? Kyan took a breath, glancing at Vayli. He reached for her hand, smiling. I'd be honored, he said. In the days that followed, they worked tirelessly. Repairs to Kyan's ship were slower this time, but the Ryosans contributed advanced crystalline components, which actually improved the craft's performance. Meanwhile, Kyan and Vayli scavenged more from the station. The plan was to establish a protected zone on Ryosa's surface, using the outpost's defenses, while forging a route to trade and safety off-world. Every day brought new challenges. Coordinating with the council tested Kyan's patience, especially when old prejudices flared up. But Vayli stood beside him, always the bridge between her people and the outsider. At night, they found moments of quiet in their small chamber, trading gentle kisses or fervent embraces, the closeness of their bodies washing away the day's stresses. One evening, Kyan was checking the upgraded sensors on his ship when Vayli slipped in behind him. How's it look? She asked, leaning over his shoulder. He smiled, pointing to the readouts. Surprisingly good. Your crystals make the system more efficient. She nodded, lips curving. He turned to face her, her proximity sending a rush of warmth through him. She gently placed her palms on his chest, looking into his eyes. The council wants to begin formal relations with friendly human outposts. We'll try a test run. Would you pilot the mission? His heart fluttered. That was a big step. Of course, he said. But you're coming with me, right? She looked uncertain. They need me here, she said softly. But I want to see more of the galaxy. I want to see it with you. Kyan's breath caught. He took her hands, pressing them to his metal arm, letting her feel the hum of its servos. We'll figure it out, he whispered. We'll travel back and forth. I can't do this alone, and I don't want to be anywhere without you. Her face flushed with color, fins flicking. She leaned in, capturing his lips in a sweet, lingering kiss. When they broke apart, she murmured, I'd never forgive you if you went off exploring without me, metal arm or not. He chuckled, heart feeling unexpectedly light. Within another week, the day came to test the ship's new modifications. A small team of Ryosans brought cargo to load, cultural artifacts, surplus crystals, items that might be traded for supplies. Vayli stood with Kyan on the tarmac, scanning the horizon. If the slavers return, we can't be gone too long, she warned. Kyan nodded, checking the readouts on a handheld device. They said their goodbyes to the enclave, the council wishing them luck. The ramp hissed shut, and Kyan settled into the pilot's seat. Vayli strapped him beside him, a mix of excitement and tension on her features. Her fins fluttered with nervous energy. Taking a breath, Kyan powered the engines. The improvements were immediately noticeable. The roar was smoother, the controls more responsive. Together, they lifted off Ryosa's cracked surface. Vayli gazed up the viewport, her eyes wide as the horizon fell away beneath them. Kyan's heart pounded with anticipation. This was more than just a flight. It was a promise, a step toward a shared future. With Veli by his side, the emptiness he'd felt for so long wasn't so empty anymore. As they breached the atmosphere, starlight enveloped them, the planet's curve visible below. Veli inhaled sharply, awestruck by the view. She reached over, lacing her fingers with Kyan's metal ones. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, the plating warming under her touch. They set course for a nearby neutral station, hoping to make peaceful contact. The hum of the engines lulled them into a calm moment, away from the chaos that had first brought them together. In the quiet of the cockpit, Veli turned to him with a tender smile. "Did you ever think, when I first saw your arm, that we'd be here?" He laughed softly, recalling that tension-filled moment in the derelict docking bay. "I thought you might slice it off, honestly." She smirked, leaning in to rest her head against his shoulder. "It was your fault for waving that thing around like a threat." He shrugged, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Maybe. Or maybe fate wanted you to realize it wasn't a weapon, at least not against you." She hummed in agreement, her glowing fins brushing his cheek. "I'm glad I was wrong about you, Kyant. And I'm glad you were brave enough to stay." He stroked the back of her hand. "I'm just glad you didn't run me through that first day." They shared a laugh, sweet and quiet. Then, together, they turned their eyes forward, into the star-speckled void, ready to shape a new destiny, one that neither of them could have imagined without the other.